Welcome back to the deep dive. For anyone who's spent time maybe studying a field like criminal justice or pre-law, there's usually that moment, isn't there, where you realize the textbook version of the law, the neat stack of rules, statutes, all that case law rusher, it just kind of collides almost violently with the messy, really emotional reality you find in a courtroom. We get used to these abstract ideas about justice, but what happens when you're suddenly, dropped right into the operational heart of the actual system? Today, we're unpacking a really powerful reflection. It details this highly impactful internship experience. It was with the Miami-Dade County Clerk of the Court and Comptroller, and specifically it focuses on the high-stakes, high-empathy world of the mental health and probate unit.
Yeah, and our mission today is really to try and extract those specific nuggets of knowledge, those moments, you could call them, the kind that transform that academic understanding into something more like a true professional calling. We're exploring a pretty fascinating transition, the shift from seeing the system as just, documents and procedures.
Just paperwork.
Exactly. To recognizing the profound, often urgent human element of justice, and especially how the administrative side, the clerk's office, handles that.
And what immediately jumps out right from the beginning of this reflection is that initial shock. It's visceral. The student described starting the internship as simply overwhelming. And it wasn't just the amount of work, apparently. It was the raw emotional side of it. Seeing people come in often scared or upset.
And that's critical context, I think. When we talk about the clerk of the court, we're talking about the sort of administrative engine of the whole justice system. They're the record keepers. They're the public interface. They process all the necessary paperwork. It really is the front line. So the expectation might be, dealing with cold, dry bureaucracy. But in this unit, the mental health and probate unit, they're often the very first point of contact for individuals and families who are experiencing acute crisis, whether that's like a sudden mental health intervention needed or a really difficult battle over a loved one's estate. The sheer volume of distress they have to process, that's what makes it so overwhelming at first.
Okay, so once that initial shock maybe wore off a bit and the reality of the human impact really started to sink in, how did the academic training begin to connect with all that chaos? Was it like a complete reset, or did the theory actually help provide some structure?
It sounds like it forced an immediate pivot. The core realization, as it's detailed in the reflection, was really understanding that the law isn't simply about rules. The critical insight was getting that behind every single case number, there's a real person, a real family, and a real story. So that academic understanding of what the law says suddenly becomes, well, almost secondary to the real-world application of how it actually affects people.
And what's fascinating here, I think, is that this immediate emotional exposure seems to force the development of these essential soft skills almost instantly. We often focus so much on, legal research skills, writing briefs.
Right, the technical stuff.
Exactly. But the reflection specifically notes the student had to learn how to stay calm and empathetic in the face of emotional, intense situations.
And that right there is the ultimate transferable skill, isn't it?
Yeah.
You can teach someone the procedural rules of, say, the Mental Health Act. That's learnable from a book. But maintaining your composure, showing compassion while you're receiving a document from someone who is visibly distraught, that's a skill that's far more valuable, I'd argue, in any public-facing legal field than just memorizing a statute section. It fundamentally redefines what competence looks like in this kind of work.
Okay, so let's look at how that idea of competence was then sort of validated in the actual judicial setting. The reflection points to one specific, really transformative experience, observing a probate trial. This was in Honorable Judge Bertila Soto's courtroom.
Yes, and this is where that abstract concept of justice really becomes tangible. Probate courts, for those who might not know, they handle end-of-life decisions, estates, guardianships. It's often the setting for the most intense, high-stakes family disputes you can imagine. The legal interpretation might be quite narrow sometimes, but the emotional stakes, they're monumental.
Wow.
And the student didn't just pop in for a quick hearing. They saw the whole thing. The often painful testimony, the sharp cross-examinations, and maybe most importantly, really feeling the weight of every single decision the judge had to make. This is the moment, the reflection says, that the academic study came alive. When you witness that kind of finality where a judge's ruling is going to irrevocably alter a family's future, it just confirms that legal rigor is absolutely necessary, but it has to be wielded with extraordinary care.
That's the financial side, the family structure side of finality. But the internship also, it seems, deeply immersed the student in the system's capacity for, immediate intervention.
And healing even. Let's shift focus a bit to the mental health aspect, specifically the weekly attendance at Marchman Court with General Magistrate Aaron Foyer.
Right, and this contrast is really crucial. If probate court often deals with, let's say, structured finality, Marchman Court is all about urgent intervention. The Marchman Act in Florida, it allows family members to petition the court for mandatory assessment and treatment for individuals who are struggling with severe substance abuse,
Okay.
often when that person can't recognize they need help.
So, in effect, the law itself becomes a mechanism for an emergency forced intervention,
Okay.
often against the will of the individual involved, but it's designed for their ultimate benefit.
Precisely. And this experience, according to the reflection, fundamentally changed the student's understanding of the justice system's role. Traditionally we think of law as holding people accountable or maybe providing judgment, sure, punishment or resolution.
Right. But Marchman Court showed the law acting as a kind of compulsory therapeutic intervention. It serves as this crucial bridge to hope, healing, and recovery for individuals and families who are otherwise just powerless against addiction and these related mental health crises.
So it almost redefines the purpose of the legal procedure in that context. It's not just about applying penalties, it's about facilitating recovery when maybe all other avenues have failed. That must require a different kind of operational empathy from the clerk's team, too, the ones processing those initial intervention filings.
Oh, absolutely. The clerk's office has to facilitate the sheer speed and efficiency needed for a crisis intervention like that,
Wow.
while still adhering to the highest standards of due process. You can't cut corners there.
Right.
And this raises a really important question. Who guides you through an environment that demands both, administrative perfection and deep human compassion?
Which brings us neatly to the third major takeaway from this reflection: the vital role of mentorship. It specifically names Ms. Nilda Diaz, Ms. Olga Blanco, Mrs. Alicia Lee, and really the entire mental health team as critical guides. What did they teach that textbooks simply couldn't?
Well, when you're working inside a system that's designed to handle human crisis day in and day out, the leadership you observe, that becomes your blueprint for your own career. It just does. The student noted that these mentors inspired them not just with their professionalism, which was obviously high, but with their empathy, describing their leadership style as patient, compassionate, and deeply human. These mentors really demonstrated how to blend two things that can seem contradictory sometimes: strictly adhering to the clerk's procedural duties, filing correctly, making sure everything is perfect for the judge and while simultaneously treating the individuals bringing in those documents, often in distress, with dignity and patience. It's the lesson that competence without compassion is, frankly, incomplete in this field.
So they really exemplified that balancing act. They welcomed questions, apparently, and showed how to blend that legal rigor with genuine personal care, which ultimately seems to have cemented the student's career path. The overall result of this whole operational deep dive was pretty clear. It reaffirmed that this path is truly my calling. The purpose sort of crystallized into advocacy, this desire to stand up for others and use the law as a tool for fairness, yes, but also for understanding.
Exactly. This experience provided real-world, high-impact proof that their career goals weren't just abstract ideas. They were grounded in a practical, observable reality. And that reinforces that feeling of purpose like almost nothing else can.
Okay, so let's try and connect this back to you, the listener. Maybe you're preparing for a similar kind of professional step, or perhaps you're mentoring someone who is. What specific practical wisdom came out of this reflection for people entering these kinds of high-stakes environments?
The advice that was shared with the next group of interns is actually incredibly simple, but it's powerful. And I think it applies to really any field that faces complexity. It's approach the work with curiosity and humility. Humility is just essential because the complexity of real life always outweighs textbook knowledge. It just does.
Always.
Which forces you to constantly learn from the professionals around you. You have to be open to that.
And the practical instruction that follows that is equally key, I think. Every task, no matter how small, teaches you something valuable. So that means whether you are, meticulously filing documents in the clerk's office, doing that foundational work, or you're sitting in a high-profile probate trial with someone like Judge Soto, you have to absorb the wisdom around you, ask questions, take notes, because, as the source puts it, you never know what moment might change your life. And that foundational work in the clerk's office, that administrative competence, it underpins everything else.
And we should also acknowledge the institutional scaffolding that made this possible. The gratitude expressed towards Miami-Dade College and MDC Works really highlights how important it is for institutions to prioritize opening these kinds of doors, ensuring that academic learning gets immediately supplemented by these potentially transformative professional experiences.
So, when we try to synthesize all these learnings, what does it really boil down to? We've traced this evolution from academic theory to, well, compassionate practice. We've explored the kind of dual roles of the justice system in the probate court with Judge Soto focusing on structure and finality, and then the Marchman court with General Magistrate Foyer focusing much more on intervention and hope. And we've definitely recognized the power of human centered, empathetic leadership, even within the administrative functions of the clerk's office.
I think the major knowledge gain here is the understanding that justice is or should be a holistic process. The next generation of legal professionals, they really must be equally adept at understanding procedural law, yes, but also demanding the compassionate application of that law, especially when dealing with these twin vulnerabilities of mental health struggles and complex family situations.
Which leads to a final thought, perhaps. If the ultimate goal of the justice system is fairness, how does witnessing these intense struggles of real families and seeing the law act sometimes as a bridge to hope, like in Marchman Court, versus other times as an agent of, say, financial closure in probate court? How does that fundamentally redefine what the system's success should even look like to those entering the profession now? The real challenge for the next generation might be defining where that need for strict legal rigor ends and where the responsibility for compassionate intervention truly begins. That's definitely something worth mulling over. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the transformative power of practical experience in the justice system.